Okay, we're going to call the meeting of the General Government Committee to order at 1:31. Can we have the roll call? I guess we don't need a roll call. We're both here, right? Tell my day's been going good. Anyway, we'll go on to committee actions. Very important discussion, possible direction regarding the development of Mendocino County's 2018 legislative platform. And Mr. Yoder. Hey, Paul.
Hey.
Do you want to do the introduction, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Brown. Today we have the pleasure of having Paul Yoder with us from Shaw, Yoder, and Antwick. And Mr. Yoder had been a lobbyist with us a few years ago, and as you may recall, and I'm not certain, Supervisor Jurdy, if you were here at the time, but Paul was a really good lobbyist for us, did a lot of good work, but in the course of the global economic downturn and the problems we had financially, we cut everything, including our lobbyist contract. So we have the good fortune today of having Mr. Yoder join us. He's back on a small contract, and one of the key reasons why we've entered into a contract is because Mr. Yoder has been helping us somewhat pro bono over the last few months because of the fire disaster response and recovery. And so at this point in time, we felt like his assistance for us was something that was necessary given all of the disasters nationwide and what we're dealing with as far as federal and state funding. So Mr. Yoder is here today working with Sarah Duquette and the committee on the legislative platform. So I'll turn it over to them.
Sarah Duquette, Executive Office. So the attachments you have today is last year's legislative platform as well as the State Regulations Working Group top priorities for cannabis. So there's a couple of issues that have come from different board members and from conversations over the past few months that I just want to highlight of things that we should consider updating in the legislative platform or maybe of interest to you. The first one is cannabis. So we did focus a lot in 2017 on cannabis and the implementation of the emergency regulations and implementation of Prop 64. So we'll going forward in 2018, we'll still have a lot of work to do in terms of regulations and moving from the emergency regulations to final regulations. So there's a lot of work there, as well as issues that have come up between local municipalities and counties working in conjunction with the state on licensing. And we have a state working group that has put together their top priorities, and they even took a poll and ranked their top 5 on the kind of things that they'd like to see changed. So that we have that for your review. Another one is transportation, and our transportation director is here today to make some comments on that. But we had the adoption of SB1 and funding coming in for roads. There is a movement to repeal that legislation. In addition, there is a Proposition 69 that would put parameters around the funding to ensure that that funding is spent for just transportation only. So we'll have our director here to speak to that as well. AB 1250 was a really big bill for us last year. We did a lot of letters and a lot of lobbying to on that bill to prevent it from being passed. It was a 2-year bill, so we're expecting that to come back this legislative year. In addition, there has been a lot of conversations with the board on the Coastal Commission and decisions around cannabis of what the Coastal Commission is going to do. Fire recovery is a big topic with us moving forward with FEMA and the state on that disaster. Recently, the board also adopted a letter regarding offshore drilling to send to our federal representatives. And those are just a couple of the highlights that's come up over the past couple of months for you guys to consider and discuss today. And I will turn it over to Mr. Yoder to add some legislative updates from Sacramento.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good afternoon again.
I think he needs us.
Good afternoon. It's good to be back, as they say. Great to be here in Ukiah today. This is a great year for money, not only in the state's general fund, but in the cap and trade regime. Governor's already proposed to fund the property tax backfill for the fire-affected counties. He's also proposed in the additional cap and trade monies that have materialized to provide funding for to fight forest fires going forward. We think actually more money is going to materialize by the time the governor puts together his May revise, possibly billions of dollars in additional funds. One of the interesting things just generally to know about this budget right now, or the 18-19 budget, I should say, is that we're in a year that we've never seen before, we may never see again. And what I mean by that is the governor is proposing to fund Proposition 98 and the schools to such an extent that it would be 100% under the state's constitution. Similarly, with respect to the state's rainy day fund, the governor last month in his proposed budget proposed to max out the funding that can go to the state's rainy day fund. Those would be the two big claims on any additional money going into the May revise. So if you hear that $3 or $4 billion in additional revenues are actually materializing to the state of California's benefit, unlike any other year, right off the top, the state is not going to have to say, okay, 40 or 45 or 50% of that money goes into Prop 98. So literally what the legislative analyst has told the Senate Budget Committee already this year is any additional funds are unfettered. And like I said, never seen that before, and we may never see it again because of all the different machinations that we have in the state's constitution. So having said that, there may be a lot more money for fire-related purposes, we hope, going forward, in addition to everything that's happened so far. I just want to make sure the board members know that our firm does a lot of tracking for our clients. And so this is your neighbor to the south. This is Sonoma County. These are bills that are already out. The deadline to introduce new bills will be this Friday. We chop legislation up a lot of different ways for our clients. We're going to give the county a Mendocino County specific bill list. We're also going to give staff new legislation broken down into about 50 different subject areas. Sarah doesn't know it yet, but she already hates me. She's going to get a list of bills for health, for mental health, for transportation, for emergency services, and so on and so forth. Going back to fire-related legislation, we already have about 30 bills, and we're not even to the bill introduction deadline. I think you can expect probably the universe to be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 50 fire-related bills. What happened was folks from this part of the state, legislators really had sort of more time to formulate new legislation. And so the bills that are already introduced are mainly from legislators that represent this part of California, the legislators that represent Santa Barbara, Ventura, Northern LA, where there were fires and then mudslides. They are just getting around to introducing their bills. So we'll have that for Sarah, for Carmel, for you early next week. And then we can start helping staff and you prioritize what you want to really focus on in 2018. Again, thank you for letting me be here today. It was always an honor to represent this county, and it's an honor to be back.
Glad you're back on board.
Thank you, Carrie.
Yes, Supervisor Jurdy.
So in looking at the cap and trade funds, which are obviously intended to reduce carbon emissions,
Yep.
we obviously have a lot of carbon emissions every time there's a forest fire. And you know, we all took the tour with CAL FIRE, at least one tour with CAL FIRE after the fires here, and they talked about how 5 years of drought, 1 year of normal rains, you probably need 4 more years of normal rainfall, which we may not be getting this year, right, in order for the forest to recover. And so, you know, we're pretty likely to have more forest fires in California, if not in Mendocino County, in the next few years. And so I'm curious if they're looking at using any of the carbon money towards thinning of forests, like the underbrush, in the wildland suburban interface zones.
Supervisor, the short answer is yes. I think what has really gotten through to Governor Brown is that for everything he's done to try to fight climate change, if the North Bay fires, the fires you experienced that others did, and then the fires in Southern California, basically eliminated, if not surpassed in terms of carbon, what was going on in California last year. You could take hundreds of thousands of cars off the road. You have a couple really bad forest fires, and it's a push at best. And I think that has gotten through to Governor Brown. So I don't want to say that everything's on the table, but mitigation is now part of what can be considered within the cap and trade regime. And the governor's already proposing to try to mitigate against future forest fires. He's also proposing to do some work with respect to sinking carbon in California. And I think, I'll put it this way, almost everything is on the table within the cap and trade regime right now.
Interesting.
Yep.
If we go back to the cannabis item, I don't know if something came into you or not, but you know, there are some children's advocates who've been meeting with supervisors, and when they met with me, I suggested that they propose a paragraph that could go into our legislative platform, and I don't know if they've sent anything in, but something to the effect that, you know, the state does have a very high cannabis tax, much higher than the county's cannabis tax, and really it seems like some of the state tax should go towards educating children to not partake in recreational cannabis.
Well, and also education to parents about the impact of cannabis on the young brain. And I'm very concerned about that as well. So I do want to see something to that effect written in.
Okay.
And thank you, Supervisor Jurdy. And I would like to ask Ms. Duquette, do you have something finalized for cannabis? Was I to run it off? Because I don't have a copy.
In your packet, you should have something, you should have a list that says State Regulations Working Group Top Priorities.
Did you get
It's
that?
just a one sheet.
It's just a one-sheet page. Our working group on cannabis provided their kind of top items, and then they ranked them of what's most pressing for the industry right now in the county. So a couple of the items, I'll just touch on the top 5, but one of them was the micro businesses. Micro business is a really big issue because many of our cultivators are small and they need micro businesses to be able to compete with the larger industry in other parts of the state. And it's has to be the same premise right now. So they want to see it as multiple premises so that there's more flexibility for these like co-op style businesses or farms to kind of come together and have different aspects in different places, but kind of do more of a co-op style in terms of businesses. Direct sales for cultivators. So right now the state, you have to have for cannabis events, it can only be at state fairgrounds, and the only people that can sell product at those are the micro businesses, micro businesses and retail. And there's a push for wanting the allowances to grow because we have such a niche kind of cultivation community. We also have a lot of nurseries and other things, some type of an allowance or license where they could temporarily be able to sell product at these trade shows or events, and also expansion of where those events can happen, allowing local jurisdictions to determine if there's additional locations that they would be okay with allowing cannabis events so that we could utilize more than just our 2 fairgrounds. Another one was the remover of the 4-acre cap for associations, so allowing the larger associations that have multiple members to exceed 4 acres. And the 5th one was, again, comes back to like the events, is supporting more direct sales through expanded venue allowances for cannabis events. And those are kind of the top 5. And I'm also going to mention the A&M designation. So right now, the state has an adult track and a medical track, and you have to be licensed separately. So we have farmers that are growing very small amounts, and they would like to see the point of determining a product as adult use or medical at the point where they test the product. Because if you're talking a small grower here that's 10,000 square feet, that's not necessarily going to be the same amount of product from a licensee that's growing multiple acres. So they want to be able to get the test results back and then determine at which is the best for the medical market, which is the best for the adult use. So those are kind of the top priorities that they identified, and they want to see the county potentially support some of those items and advocate on behalf of some of those items with the state during this regulatory process with both the state agency as well as the Cannabis Advisory, I want to say committee. I think it's committee.
Madam Chair, I was just going to add, I just want to make sure everybody knows that unfortunately, well, what has happened in state government is the state's general fund sort of fronted money, if you will, for Proposition 64 activities. And unfortunately, what the governor proposed last month was for the 18-19 revenues to, in essence, repay the state's general fund for what it's already expended, and that 1920 would really be the first year where you would see, because there obviously is money for substance abuse treatment and education, but 1920 rather than 18-19 under the governor's proposal would be the first year where that would start to roll out. given the state's general fiscal situation, which I already described, I'd like to think that there might be a way to maybe talk the governor into some different proposal that could maybe get the treatment funds rolling sooner. But I just want to make sure everybody knows what Governor Brown's proposed for 1819.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And we do have the policy statement on marijuana in youth that our Mendocino County Policy Council on Children and Youth created that really focuses on prevention, which I think is a starting point of what we kind of want to see in terms of money flowing to some of these prevention areas.
Any questions, Supervisor?
No, other than I just watched a webinar last week on the housing laws that were passed last year, and they, I can't remember the bill number, but they did pass a law which the governor signed, which was an issue that we had talked about last year, which was the fact that the state has encouraged secondary dwelling units, accessory dwelling units, in part by requiring that cities and counties cannot charge capacity fees, water sewer capacity fees, on those second units. And they did pass a law this last year that extended that to special districts, which has a bigger impact in Mendocino County because, at least in inland Mendocino County, there's quite a few water districts and sewer districts. It also, according to the webinar, they also extended it to water companies. So we do have a few private water companies, and I know there's a couple on the coast. So, so that was good news to hear. I hadn't heard that before, but I was glad to hear that they did have that cleanup legislation.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just literally got an email about another ADU bill being introduced in 2018. So I think you're gonna see even more work on that issue in 2018. So we'll specifically track that for you.
Okay.
I'd like to bring up our transportation director just to talk a little bit about what's been going on with SB1 and implementation here and what he's hearing from his associations, and suggest that we also update our area on transportation to really focus on these two efforts that are happening this year.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. So last year, the Board of Supervisors took a support position on SB1, Senator Beal's initiative to, it was called the Road Repair and Accountability Act. And within SB1, there were several specific funds, and one was for local street and road repair. That has a distinct name, a road maintenance and rehabilitation account. And the idea is we would have a stream of money that was the 6.5% state-based excise tax on fuel converted, that sales tax on fuel converted to a permanent excise tax. It amounted to, I think, a 14-cent per gallon increase on diesel and 12 on gasoline. Long and short of it was the board worked with our partners at the state through the California State Association of Counties and the California League of Cities to hammer out this legislation. The money that comes specifically to Mendocino County for local roads has been being estimated and projected. I think my final cut through on it is that within 18 years it ramps up. The county would have received $100 million. So that's kind of the numbers I'm using right now. And that'll average then 5.5 million in this new RMRA funding. And so, the county was really looking forward to applying that to our almost $6 million reported road deficit. It's not enough to completely fill that, but we think by adjusting our targets and trying to make some improvements to our roads, we can treat a third of our road system in those first 18 years. So it's really important funding. Well, now this year, there is an initiative to repeal that, and there's a bill, Prop 69, right, Sarah?
It's a ballot measure.
Yeah, ballot measure to try to secure that. And, I guess I would ask the board to continue to support SB1 and the whole Road Repair and Accountability Act from last year. And there's information that the California State Association of Counties has put out, and it's at their website, and there's information, I believe, for how the board can support this, trying to hold on to our revenues from SB1 from last year.
Yes, and I do believe we have a resolution.
We plan on bringing the resolution forward to the board, correct?
Okay, on the 27th?
That's what we're aiming for, yes.
Okay, and also I'll be over to CSAC Board of Directors meeting on Thursday morning, or most of the day on Thursday, actually. And we're going to have whole discussion
Right.
on both the proposed Prop 69 and also our own initiative, ACA 5. Did I say it right?
Yep, yes, you did.
Yeah, I think ACA 5 was always planned as part of SB1. That was a logical follow-on. But I think these other repeal initiatives, I think Prop 69 somehow, and I look over because I'm not sure, somehow try to counter those.
May I?
Yes,
So
please.
ACA 5 really has become Proposition 69.
Okay.
Proposition 69 was put on the ballot by the legislature as, well, it was originally ACA 5. And then there's the referendum effort that would be on the November ballot. The thinking is if the voters approve Proposition 69, then heading into the November election, it's going to be easier for the no on referendum side to say, look, we just lockboxed the transportation revenues as much as we possibly can, so you should vote against the repeal. Because you really can't make the argument, hopefully at that point, that the revenues can be moved into any other purpose in state government. So that's the thinking for those that supported SB1 and want to fight the recall, or the referendum, referendum. Yep.
So for clarification, Prop 69 will be on the June ballot?
Correct.
And then if the repeal measure collects enough signatures, and I understand they've got a lot of money behind them, it would be on the November ballot?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's our resolution is to support Prop 69 and oppose SB1 repeal.
Okay.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you.
I'd like to turn it over to CEO Angelo to make any comments she'd like in terms of fire recovery and work that's being done on fire recovery.
Thank you, Ms. Duquette. So what you should have is the January 9th letter, and each of you should have one of these in front of you. This is what we sent. As you recall, we sent this to Governor Brown and to Mark Gerladucci from the Office of Emergency Services. This was sent from the 4 counties. It was signed by our chair. And at that time, it was Dan Hamburg. So I guess we sent it right January 9th. Anyway, what you have is you have 2 pages of requests. The first one is the fiscal fire-related legislative requests. The second page is the policy-related fire-related legislative requests. There are 23 requests here for legislation. So I request that we include this in our legislative platform. And I think that, these requests came from the 4 counties. So I believe that the other 3 counties in their ledge platforms are also asking for this, and I think we've done a really good job of summarizing the needs for our region. So, Mr. Yoder, you helped with this, so I know you're aware of these, but I would like these to be part of the legislative platform. We'll see how far we get.
Supervisor Jurdy, what is your opinion?
We've already supported this. I think it makes sense. I'm curious if it might also make sense to have a clause introducing this, noting that this is a request of the 4 counties. So if someone were to get a hold of our legislative platform, they would then see that Sonoma or Napa and Lake also supported at least these specific items.
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
And I fully support it as well. Okay.
I'm sorry, there was one other item that I brought up with staff. There's an issue with the disability pension issues where it's a little bit easier ironically, to get a permanent disability pension than it is to get a temporary workers' comp rendering, and which doesn't make sense. But the fact that every employer in California pays worker comp and only public agencies have public pensions, and so that's probably why it's more lenient in the way the courts have ruled and the way the statutes are written. But if, you know, this is something I really think needs to be cleaned up, because it's not really appropriate, in my opinion, and I think the opinion of most people who have served on an independent retirement system and seen this over the years, that the threshold is as low as it is to get a permanent disability retirement.
Would you like to respond? Or?
Well, I understand the issue. I think we're talking about Labor Code 4850, and there aren't many specific parts of California code that I can cite that specifically, and the reason I can cite that one is because I'm embarrassed to admit that that's one we've tried super hard on multiple times over the year. I agree with you completely. If anything, this legislature and this governor recently expanded it a little bit to take into account some of the law enforcement personnel that were shot in San Bernardino, and to lengthen the amount of time that they could receive benefits. It's something that I promise you, Supervisor, that if I can figure out a way to crack that nut for counties, I will. But I understand the issue very, very, very well.
Any other questions?
Well, I just think we should have something in our platform on this. Yep. And like I said, it just is on a fairness level. It doesn't seem right that it'd be easier to get a permanent disability than to get a temporary disability.
Understood. Understood.
Did you get that, Mr. Kett? Thank you. On the horizon, looking as we go, I realize we're going to be going into our second year of a 2-year session. And we do have four, I believe, water districts that will be looking at legislation that I believe Senator McGuire is going to carry, but I don't think it's going to be until 2019, excuse me. And we need to be supportive, because what they'll be doing is combining agencies, special districts, because they're all very small. And they have come together under a JPA, but they will be looking at legislation. I don't know if it'll come sooner than later and be introduced, but obviously we have a deadline, so it really is looking at 2019. But we should put that on our legislative platform forecast for 2019.
Sarah Duquette, Executive Office. I would support that in adding it this year. It seems that they were very supportive for consolidation for failing water systems, even though there's definitely a need for consolidation in terms of being able to serve the public while our water systems aren't failing, to actually be able to serve our population. We definitely need consolidation. So we can add that in for this year and kind of mark that as moving forward and supporting their efforts with Senator McGuire and Assemblyman Wood.
Great.
One more housing issue. I've been told that there is at least one water district in Mendocino County that does not have a moratorium on new hookups, but have told their residents that they will not allow them to rent out part of their property. So a property owner has a permitted second unit. They're aware of it. They've hooked them up. They can occupy it. They just are, the water district, though, apparently has told the property owner, but you can't rent it to someone. You can occupy that second building. And I don't know that needs a clarification of state law. It sounds to me like maybe this is just a rogue agency, but
that sounds more to me with my involvement with special districts. It may be something we need to look into, but I believe that it's the district itself, and they probably don't have a legal leg to stand on.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that this wasn't something that needs to be corrected in state law.
Mm-hmm. To my understanding, you are correct. If you'd like me to triple check that in Sacramento, I'm happy to do that, Supervisor. But I think your suspicion is correct that someone's a little rogue here. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And it would be up to the constituents of that district to make an issue about that, or a county supervisor to go and address that particular body to say exactly what you said.
Okay.
Do you have a comment, County Council?
Are there additional items either that was mentioned before or other ones that are on the horizon that you'd like to see included or updated for this year's platform?
Well, we've got at RCRC a couple of weeks ago, maybe it's more than that, maybe it's almost a month now. They did go over quite a bit of legislation, upcoming, ongoing, and I looked through it. There was nothing that struck me, because we usually support our organizations, both the rural counties and CSAC, in their endeavors. So, and I think we've discussed most of them. I did talk a little bit about the diversion of solid waste, organic solid waste, and the regulations that are coming, are being discussed. They're draft. I don't think anything's complete yet, but certainly that would be important to us as well, to watch those regulations, and I could probably actually get you some language on that, because I believe we need to do that. Some of the timelines, I don't see how counties can make those with the solid waste issue if it does get put into the regulations, and that's just my opinion.
Okay.
So, federal. I do know that Department of Interiors is working on comments and what have you from Land into Trust program, which can be a horrific issue for whether it's a city or a county. And I can't remember, and I forgot to look specifically for it in our 2017. Did we have anything? I don't think we did.
I don't think we did have anything on land to trust.
Or you end up with a situation that we all know occurred in Rohnert Park, with the big casino and land being bought and then immediately going into trust. Local jurisdictions as well as the local public sometimes cannot react and comment as quickly as Department of Interior's for their period of comment allows, I guess is the best way to put it. But I would like to see something on that.
Okay. Is there any additional items you'd like in terms of the FERC process that's currently underway with the Potter
I
Valley
think
project?
that would be very important. And I know we have, or have had, I know it's in here someplace, about the feasibility study for the raising of Coyote Valley Dam. And I can't think of anything for groundwater sustainability agencies or what we might be looking at in the future. Do you have any, since you are our staff person, do you have any comment?
So I am encouraged in terms of the first round for implementation dollars for Sigma. It seems that they're going to fully fund all of the grant proposals that meet requirements. So that's very good. The one thing that I think is of big concern is we're waiting for the updated Bulletin 118. Haven't been successful in meeting many of their deadlines in terms of Sigma, and so we're expecting that to come out in 2018. We could see additional basins in Mendocino County, and I think probably updating the language we have to support additional funding through Proposition 1 for these new basins, because we could see a next wave come in, and for disadvantaged communities and rural communities, it's going to be another hardship we faced with Ukiah Valley, but having to do that for additional basins is going to be a very costly and difficult for rural counties in particular. And as the county itself, outside of Ukiah Valley, there's very few basins that have an agency that would be able to do this besides the county, which we're pretty much the primary agency in most of the other basins that would be under consideration. So we'll have to wait and see if we end up with one or two more. I think the two most likely would probably be either Navarro or Hopland, or I should say Sinnell, or possibly Potter Valley.
No.
It's connected, according to the state of California.
Well, I know that actually Department of Water Resources was asking a lot of questions of people in Potter Valley. I think they got their answers, and we haven't heard anything yet. Because our groundwater, when you have a cracked rock bed, doesn't stay. Disappears pretty quickly. A little bit different than what we have here in Ukiah Valley. Trying to think,
One item that's come up quite a bit within the water world locally and around is the trash amendment that is a requirement to implement by the regional water boards. And there's been lawsuits around whether this is an unfunded mandate and whether the state should be allocating dollars towards some of the local jurisdictions that are implementing that. So that's kind of been one of those things that's been discussed and going back and forth of how that will ultimately play out in terms of implementation. And we have like a 10-year time frame to implement that 100% trash capture in MS4 areas. So that would be for us, Ukiah Valley area and City of Fort Bragg greater area.
so that's the stormwater.
And I believe, I want to say it might have been the city of Los Angeles. I think it was a Southern California city that brought forward the lawsuit with the state. But there's been some talk on that.
And on the cap and trade, I know that previous funds allocated for grant funding proposals, and it had to do with disadvantaged communities, ducks. And it's called, I'm trying to think, the Cal Enviro Screen. They're trying to change that definition so all disadvantaged communities could put in a proposal. And the way that it was actually written for those funds under cap and trade had to do about bad air quality. But it was really made, the language was done to only include about 5 or 6 counties in the whole state. So it ended up that others could not take advantage of it, and I'm not sure where that's at this point.
I have to say RCRC has done a really good job, and they've been trying awfully hard on this. I think they're responsible, to the extent there's been movement at the state level, they're responsible for a lot of it, so I want to tip my hat to them. But I think that the screen continues to be updated. So I think another update is underway. I don't know that it's necessarily going to be everything that the more rural parts of California would like it to be, but it's the first 2 iterations of it have been pretty widely criticized, even by some of the more urban parts of California, just because of what's that?
That's good to hear.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Some of the most urban parts of California, I think, are just as upset about how it works or how it doesn't as rural parts of California. So how about I plug in with RCRC, check in with RCRC, and just see what our firm can do to help on that issue?
Okay,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
Yeah, we'll do.
2 more things. One was since we're talking about federal for a second, this wasn't an issue until recently again, but there has been a movement afoot by the administration to look at offshore oil exploration. I'm just thinking we could maybe put some language in under economic development, something to the effect that, support our coastal dependent businesses by opposing federal leasing of federal leases offshore. And because I don't think we have anything here, but it wasn't an issue until very recently.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there is anything in there. It was a few years ago, but not now.
We'll add that.
And then I guess, I don't know if we have any more input, but I'd like to know, oh, yes.
No. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It was just,
I'd like to know when maybe Supervisor Jurdy and I can look at a draft.
Probably within the next 1 to 2 weeks.
Okay. So what date would be proposed to take it to the board?
What we can do, if you would like to kind of speed it up and not come back to general government, is we can have a draft and send it to you both, and you separately could make comments and get it back to us, and we can try to bring it back either on the 15th or 27th, 13th, or the 27th of March, whichever date we can slot in.
And-
Probably 30 minutes.
And explain to Mr. Yoder the fact that with the fires and everything else that's been on our plate, we didn't get to the legislative platform. Usually we try to have it done by December.
Right.
So the first of the year, we're putting it forward. I had less concern this year because it's the second year of a 2-year session. Next year, going into 2019, will be a whole different ballgame. So we need to really get started on this early in October. But that's why we're so late.
well, yeah, understood.
Yeah, and actually our representatives really understand as well and know what was on the 2017s, which kind of mirrors what we're going to have in the coming year. So, any wrap up?
I think that's it. We will prepare a draft for 2018 and send that out to you, and we will work with the clerk of the board staff to identify which meeting in March we can bring it forward to, and we can have both of you as the sponsors of the item.
Okay. Then number 3 on our agenda is approval of minutes from July 10th, 2017. I did read those. Did you, Supervisor? Did you find any issue?
No,
Neither did I. Then it's time for public expression. Does anyone want to come up and speak under public expression? Seeing no one. We do have announcements. Any announcements? I might add that I will be, as I stated earlier, Thursday over in Sacramento for CSAC board meeting, and I was invited by Supervisor James Gore to meet with federal and state staff to discuss housing funding and the relief that we might be able to find. So I'm not sure. What would you?
Chair Brown, there's 3 things scheduled that morning. One is that meeting at 8 o'clock,
Well,
I believe, that Supervisor Gore is scheduled.
I haven't got, is this Thursday?
Oh, no, I'm on Friday.
Right,
Is that
Friday,
meeting
I haven't
Thursday?
gotten to that. I'm still on
Yeah,
Thursday.
okay, thank
So
you.
as soon as the CSAC board meeting concludes, usually we're done by 2-3 o'clock. Evidently, he has talked to CSAC staff for us to meet with federal and state individuals that can help us get some of that funding that's being made available, or at least talk to us about it. And then, yes, I'm staying overnight on Friday, and I will be going to the Capitol at the invitation of Senator McGuire to take part in a special ceremony honoring first responders and our NorCal champions. Never gone there for that, so it'll be interesting. I hear it's very emotional and special for all those being honored. And at the same time, our county will be one of the numerous counties meeting with Cal OES, Office of Emergency Services, for another fire meeting. That's 9 a.m. at the Capitol event. No.
No, I think it's, I would have to check.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's the same place we met the last time, or
I think I
they
saw
have
it
at
at
the
Capitol
Capitol.
Event
I'll
Center,
have to
but
look.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
And I will get there as quickly as possible because they both start at the same time. Otherwise, our staff does have an agenda and has some statements that need to be made with issues that have recently come up. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes.
And be there for that, and the rest is going to be history, and we drive back home. So
I have a question on the issue that Supervisor Gore brought up. At the North Coast Resource Partnership meeting that where Supervisor Brown and I were the representatives attending for Mendocino County, with 6 other counties, he did float the concept of maybe Mendocino, Lake, Sonoma, and Napa joining some sort of consortium, kind of like this, but I'm not sure exactly what he was thinking, but basically some sort of pitch to say we're a super region, fund these recovery efforts on a regional basis. And I'm wondering, has that moved a little farther along? I mean, I know we have these letters that are put together on behalf of all counties.
I'm not sure about that, and I don't know if Miss Angelo is or not, but
No, I have not heard. There's so many efforts occurring, but I haven't heard anything in particularly what you're saying.
It sounded like the concept he was trying to float was maybe as a super region of 4 counties, we might have a little better shot of getting some federal funds, I think was the idea. I mean, we're obviously known in Sacramento.
Yeah, I know that just based on the letter that you have in front of you from January, we've done everything we can to form a region for that very reason. And we have to remember that Southern California is also asking for resources. And so for the Northern California region to come together, certainly we may have a little better shot. So, but I haven't heard anything specific about Supervisor Gore.
well, I'll sure find out. I've got to email him. We were together at a meeting last Friday, and that's when he invited me, if all the meetings come out and with the right people. Matters from staff. Hearing none. Golly, we're adjourned.